Hi there. So this week I was fortunate enough to play D&D with my children for the very first time. And it was kind of, as a dad, it was quite a special moment for me. And so I just wanted to spend a few minutes just kind of talking about it, because it wasn't exactly something that I was planning on doing up front. It wasn't really something that I'd ever, really given much thought to. It just kind of happened one day, and I just wanted to go over how that happened, because honestly, in retrospect, I'm really glad that I did this. And so I thought it might be helpful to any other parents or maybe teachers or guardians out there who might be watching, to kind of hear from myself in terms of, what did I learn from this experience? What maybe would I do differently next time? And just in general kind of advice that I would give to people in my position. So before I start, I'll just talk a little bit about my children. I'm not going to use their real names in this video to protect their identities, but I have two children. One of them is 6 and one of them is 7. So they are very young. And in fact, to be honest with you, this is one of the reasons why I wasn't planning to play D&D with them, because in my head I was always thinking they're far too young, they're quite sensitive, there's quite a lot of dark themes in D&D. But that said, there's all sorts of fantasies. I'm sure we can think of them. Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, The Hobbit, even like fairy stories like Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella and all of these sorts of things. I mean, ultimately, they are fantasies. That's where the fantasy genre came from. It's a modern retelling of mythology. And so by stripping away some of those darker elements, kind of sanding off those edges, is there an experience here in D&D which you can give your children that's quite, PC and appropriate for them? So I'll just spend a couple of minutes going over my children in a bit of detail. So the girl is the older of them. Her name's Chloe. She is quite a sensitive girl, meaning that she gets very, I know that she really lingers over details of things. For example, at school this last year, she was learning about the Great Fire of London, and she was constantly thinking about that afterwards, constantly bringing it up, and sometimes even having nightmares about the idea of a fire burning down half of London. For some reason, it just really lingered in her mind, and she's always been sensitive in this way. And this is one of the reasons why I was always a bit worried about sharing D&D with her. At the same time, I would say that she is quite a bossy person. Like when she's in her group of friends, she really likes to be kind of in control. She's the one who's kind of dictating the play and deciding how it works. And also she really doesn't like losing. When we play games together, she is someone who will constantly be reinventing the rules so that she isn't losing, or so she's winning. The rules will miraculously change mid-game because no, actually, when you step over the line, that actually means that you need to do this first, and you never said that up front, but suddenly that's the rule apparently, because that enables her to keep playing. So yeah, this combination of being bossy, being sensitive, and changing the rules didn't make me believe that maybe she would be in a position of enjoying D&D, but there we go. And on the other side, my son is a bit younger. He's 6 years old. We'll call him James. And he, unlike his sister, is very much a follower rather than a leader. He very much likes to kind of go with the flow of things. He just enjoys kind of just being part of things, I guess, which is good because it means that the two of them really get on well. Like honestly, I'm so blessed as a father that my children really get on well. I've never known children to have such a close relationship as my two children. Of course they fight and argue, they're siblings, of course they're going to, but like they want to be together all the time, playing together, doing the same things as each other, which is wonderful. And my son is a lot more, I guess we could say, thoughtful than my daughter. James likes to, he's a bit more of a reflector. He more kind of internalizes things. So if something is affecting him or impacting him, you don't necessarily know straight away, because he tends to kind of take it in and think back on it later. It still might affect him, but you just never really know in the moment. And the way this all happened was, for a while, you know, they've known that their daddy goes along every Monday to what we call the secret club, Daddy's secret club that he goes to. I'm never hiding it from them. They know that I go to this secret club. They see my models, they see my dice. And one day we went along to like a Games Workshop store, and they had some free models that they were giving out, and they really wanted to try painting. Now obviously they're very young, they're not very good, to put it mildly. You know, these are the models that they painted, and you know, it's their first ever attempts at the age of 6 and 7. The point is that they wanted to participate, they wanted to take part in these things, and then they were badgering me afterwards. Like, they kept asking, oh, can we paint some more models? Models are expensive, guys, you know, so I'm like, oh, I'm not too sure. But anyway, we were up in the loft, which is where I am now, and we were looking at some of my models, and they found my dice tower, and they were just like rolling some dice, and it just kind of happened that I was like, yeah, maybe let's play something. Do you want to play? And they were like, yeah, let's play. So we ended up doing it. Now, as is often the case of things, I'm sure you'll relate if I tell you that I'm a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to, I'm not a hoarder, but I mean, like, I do like to kind of collect things and find little things, and I think, oh, this might be useful one day. And as it happened, there's a magazine that was recently published in the UK, the Dungeons and Dragons magazine, and it's literally for beginners to the game. It's like a monthly magazine that just goes over some really basic stuff about how to play, but at the back of every single issue there is like a small kind of taster campaign, and the idea is that it's just like 1 or 2 hours long. You roll up with, you know, pre-made characters, and you just kind of get a little sampling of D&D. And I thought, well, that's perfect, because straight away, you know, the game gives you pre-made character sheets, and the game gives you little minis for these characters. It's like this little they're little standees, I guess we could call them, rather than minis. And so yeah, that's what happened. I've got 4 characters to choose from. I'm like, which of these guys do you want to be? And the characters that they chose, my daughter Chloe, she decided that she wanted to play as Irina Iloris, who is a wood elf fighter, fights with a bow primarily. My son, however, I was trying to encourage him to take the rogue character, but he really, really wanted to play as Merovich Farfoot, who is a wizard. Now, a wizard is quite a complicated class to play as, but he was insisting that he really wanted to be this wizard. So I was like, well, okay, I'm not going to stand in the way of things. I will obviously help him out a little bit. So yeah, it's a halfling wizard, and you know what, like, these are very basic pre-made characters, but there's nothing particularly wrong with them. There's nothing shocking here, really. There's a nice selection of spells that he has, like a nice selection of damage dealing spells like Magic Missile and Thunder Wave, and then there's some more like utility spells like Comprehend Languages, Charm Person, and Identify. So it's a nice little mixture of spells there. Stat block is absolutely fine as well. So, and I let them go into things at level 2, which just happens to be how they are here. And the adventure itself is very straightforward. It starts you off in the town of Vandalin, which is the same kind of mining settlement that's used in the starter modules of Dragon of Icefire Peak. And the adventure basically starts that the heroes arrive in an inn in the middle of the town. They go inside, and there's no one there. It looks as though everyone's abandoned things quite quickly. Everywhere's quite messy. And as they investigate and try and find out what's going on, they find that the place is infested with rats. But not just any rats. These rats are cranium rats. They are rats who have their brains showing. Now, obviously, I picked this module up. I kind of flicked through just to see if it was appropriate, and I thought, you know what, fighting rats, that doesn't seem too bad. Like, it's not like it's some ogre or monster or something. A rat is a rat, right? I mean, I don't think that's too dangerous. So yeah, we were fighting cranium rats in this inn, and the cranium rats were being led by this kind of rat leader, this rat king, who was actually it's like three boys in a trench coat. It was literally, the way it's written in the module, it is 6 cranium rats that have like formed a kind of gestalt consciousness together, and they've linked their tails to create this like giant rat form. And this king rat has basically taken the innkeeper and the other patrons hostage. They've kept them prisoner for some reason. And so it's a really straightforward campaign. They just kind of need to explore the common room. You can go downstairs, you can look in the stable, look in the toilets, you can find someone who's kind of like hiding and he's really terrified. You can find like a horse that's been like eaten by rats. You can find several like swarms around the place. And eventually, obviously upstairs is where the prisoners are. You defeat the boss and you complete the encounter. Really straightforward encounter. Yeah, like honestly, when I was reading it, I was like, I would be quite bored playing through this. This is very, very basic. It's like, it's so obvious where you need to go. It is so obvious what you need to do. But I was very surprised. They loved it. They were talking about it afterwards. They were laughing about the funny moments. They were begging me to play again the next day. And with that, there were some lessons, which I guess I can share coming out of this. Lesson number 1, and probably the main lesson that I took out of this, is get them to roll a lot more than you would with a regular group of people at the table, because my children loved rolling. Like I said already, the reason they started playing was because they were playing with my dice tower. They like rolling dice all the time. So I made sure to make more calls for checks than I normally would. And of course, if one of them was rolling, the other one would want to make the exact same roll. So essentially all rolls were at advantage throughout the entire session because everything was doubled. But that's fine, I don't care. I wasn't going to kill them, you know? So at one point, for example, there was a locked door, and my daughter, she decided that she wanted to try and pick the lock. Now I know that she didn't have any like lock picking tools, and she wasn't like proficient in this. I didn't say it in that way, but I was like, well, how are you going to pick this lock? How are you going to do this? You don't have a key. And she said, oh, maybe I can find a stick that I can put in. And I'm like, well, you know, Chloe, you've seen a lock. Have you ever tried to unlock a door with a stick? It's quite difficult, isn't it? Tell you what, roll me a survival check or an investigation check. So this was her looking for an appropriate stick. Okay, because it needed to be a stick that was small enough to go inside the lock, but strong enough that it wouldn't just snap as soon as she tried to like use it like a lockpick. So she rolled that, so did my son. Okay, they've got the stick. Then they need to make an attack roll to get the stick off the tree and kind of whittle it down. All right, they've done that. Then I'm not even really caring what they roll. Like as long as it's a number, I'm just like, yeah, it's fine. You've got it. And then finally, the actual check was the sleight of hand to see if they could then use it to kind of open the lock. So yeah, where normally in a game I would just call one thing, here I was calling for every single little thing because they loved rolling and they wanted to do it all the time. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised really, because obviously, children's play is all about make-believe. You know, whenever they're playing by themselves, they're playing families, they're playing army, they're playing dress-up, they're playing doctors and nurses or mummy and daddy. There's a lot of yes-anding already when children are playing. So the idea of us being in this imaginary situation and them kind of role-playing off each other was like second nature almost. But what wasn't second nature to them was the idea of them having a referee at all times stepping in and saying, Actually, no, that's not what happens. So that took a little bit of getting used to, which is quite funny because normally in a group it's the opposite way around. Normally you come across, when you're playing with adults, and especially if they're new to the game, they're almost afraid to do things because they're like, well, what if I break the game somehow? Like, I don't want to impose my will on the game. They're like almost hanging back, not wanting to do anything, but and almost looking to the DM to tell them what to do. But here it's the opposite way around. My children were just like completely going off script at times, and I was constantly having to pull them back. Probably the best example of her just kind of going off on one was when Chloe suddenly decided randomly that she was going to shoot her bow into the ceiling, and then that's right, because when they were walking they stepped on the floor, and I described how they made it creak, and because of that the rats kind of attacked them. And so after that my daughter was like, what if I shoot my bow into the ceiling and then I can use the arrows like monkey bars, and I was honestly impressed. I was like, that's really high level thinking. So yeah, obviously I let her roll for that, and you know, she rolled okay, and so I described how she got about halfway across the room, but then one of the arrows broke and she fell. So I kind of enabled her but pulled her back at the same time. I don't know why I was surprised by this, because they are my children, but yeah, kids are really smart, a lot smarter than we kind of give them credit for sometimes. As I said, James decided to play as a wizard. I was worried that might be a bit overwhelming for him, but you know, he got it. You know, he got it straight away. I mean, there were a few spells on this list that he kind of just ignored. Like he never even attempted to use like mage armor or shield. I don't think he really understood what that was for. But there were other ones like light and identify in particular that he just got them straight away. And that was probably because as a halfling he doesn't have dark vision, and as an elf my daughter does, and I wanted to make her feel empowered, and so I described how the basement was very dark, but she can see it because she has dark vision. He cannot. But he has the light spell, and he got it. He just understood that straight away. And identify also, the idea that he can touch a thing, cast a spell, and he just knows what the thing is. Amazing, and he used it all the time. So for example, when they first found these cranium rats, and at first they didn't know what they were, and they both rolled quite badly on their nature check to know what they were, but then he just used identify on them, and I was like, well great, you've identified it. And so then I was able to tell them what cranium rats are and where they come from, and that they are made by mind flayers. What's a mind flayer? Do a history check. Okay, a mind flayer is this. And I was able to kind of build on it this way. And likewise, like I say, Chloe, she wasn't playing a spellcaster, but you know, she was still being really creative with her use of bow and arrow and sword and shield. I already described how she was monkey barring at one point. In the second session that we played, there was like this rushing river at one point, and her character had sufficient strength to be able to just jump across the river, but not so for my son. And so she decided, oh, why don't I go and get a really long stick, and he can use it like a pole vault to get over the river. Fantastic. Once again, investigation to find the stick. Once again, we whittle the stick down once again, and then we get the acrobatics check to try and jump over the river at advantage because you're helping him. And so that was just really clever play. I really enjoyed that. And then what was quite funny was on the other side, once they got to the other side of the river, Chloe said to my son, she was like, aren't you going to say thank you? And he just kind of ignored her. And so after a couple of minutes, I was like, James, give me a perception roll. So he does. And I say, you notice that Chloe's looking at you a little bit grumpily. She seems annoyed about something. And at this point, they're both clueless. They're like, what am I annoyed about? What's going on? So I say, roll an insight check. So he rolls an insight check. Well, you've been traveling together a while now. You're pretty sure that she's annoyed with you because you didn't say thank you. Yeah, he did not like that. He's like, Daddy, no, stop. It was quite funny. At one point, they went down into the cellar, and there were a couple of swarms of rats, which they dispatched of very easily. And afterwards, there weren't any more rats down there, but they kind of thought that there must be, for some reason, they were convinced that there must be more rats down there. And they were looking around for the more rats. And my daughter, Chloe, she just suddenly started coming out with all this nonsense about how, oh, maybe there were some rats, and maybe they were drinking some of the wine down here because it's in a wine cellar, and they must have got drunk, and maybe that's why they haven't attacked us yet. Maybe they're hiding because they're drunk or something. Which leads me to, don't be afraid to railroad children. Obviously, as grown-ups, we kind of hate railroading in a campaign. We knee-jerk against it. But with children, they don't seem to mind, and in fact, without it, they kind of get stuck in the weirdest of places. So, the main issue being, they want definitive answers. They want to know, are there rats down here, or are there not rats down here? I was treating it like I normally would. So at first, I was like, well, give me a perception roll. Okay, you don't hear or see any more rats down here, but they didn't. For some reason, they were still, as I said, my daughter was like, oh, maybe they're drunk, maybe they're hiding. So then do an insight roll. Okay, you are fairly certain there are no more rats down here. That didn't work. An investigation roll. Okay, you see no evidence of any more rats down here. But because I wasn't definitively saying there are no more rats, they were just stuck here looking. And in the end, I had to ask them to give a perception roll again. And I said, oh, you hear noises coming from upstairs. And when that wasn't enough, I then had to kind of nudge them and say to them, okay, you hear noises upstairs. Do you want to go back up and investigate that? Yes? Okay, that's what you're gonna do then. And if it wasn't for that, I think they would still be stuck in the basement to this day. I knew going into things, I was not going to put them in danger. I was not going to kill them. A little bit of mild peril, but nothing actually like strenuous. But still, as I mentioned, my daughter is very sensitive. She doesn't like the idea of being hurt. She doesn't like the idea of blood. And in particular, she really didn't like it. As I mentioned earlier, she likes to cheat a little bit. She really didn't like it if I hit her with my monster, and in particular, she hated it if she tried to roll and she would miss me. But to be honest with you, like, I wouldn't say that I was fudging the rolls during this. I really wasn't fudging anything, but at the same, because I was rolling openly and explaining all the way through what these things meant. But at the same time, I was not exactly strenuously applying rules throughout, so the monsters were making non-optimal plays. But even then, like, my daughter at one point, she got hurt during a combat, and even though she'd only taken like 3 damage, she was obsessed with the idea that she needed to heal. She needs to heal this off. It's like a tenth of her total hit points. No, I need to heal this off. So you know what, they were in a wine cellar at the time, so I was like, well, investigate this wine cellar. They looked around. I was like, sure, why not? There's a couple of healing potions that they find hidden amongst the wine. I don't care. I have no intention of killing my kids. But despite this obvious lack of challenge, again, they didn't seem to mind. They just liked the idea of rolling dice and telling a story. And equally, spell slots. So like I said, with my son, he picked up being a wizard really, really well. But at the same time, I wasn't going to like get on his case about the idea of tracking spell slots. Like I just let him cast basically as many spells as he wanted to. I didn't really care. At the very end of the game, they arrived in this final room with this big rat. I just made it a big rat. I didn't like the idea of the 3 rats in a trench coat idea, so it was just a big rat. And I described how it was like looking at them, and it had all these people prisoner. And my son, he decided that he would use disguise self. Now, obviously, disguise self doesn't work this way, but he said, I want to make myself look like a rat. And I was like, sure, all right, you use disguise self, you make yourself look like a rat. Great. And so he says, I want to look like a rat and go over and hug him. Okay, so now I'm imagining some sort of like deception roll or something. He's trying to like win over his affections. It's kind of be like a diplomatic way out of this. All right, fine, I'll see where it goes. And in the end, he said no, he was going to go over to the rat, hug him, and then just cast Thunderwave on him. Well, of course, that means 2 leveled spells in 1 turn. It's 2 spell slots. He didn't have 2 spell slots left at that point. But you know what? I don't care. I don't care. It was creative play. My son was, enjoying himself. I let it happen. And I described in detail how, he opens the door and the rat turns and he's kind of blinking in the light, a little bit blinded for a moment. And in that moment, my son, he sees the rat and he changes his appearance to look like a rat. No, that's not how disguise self works. I don't care. Looks like a rat. And the rat's like, oh, this must be another rat. And he comes over to hug him. Oh, he's a bit confused at first. And then as he goes to hug him, boom! Thunder wave, and he just goes flying back, splat against the wall. And with that, the prisoners in the room are like, get him, lads! And they all grab like random things in the room, like a lamp or something, and they run over to him and they're like beating him. And my son absolutely loved this. Like, James was just cracking up. He was in hysterics. And afterwards, my 2 children, that was all they could talk about afterwards, was how they pretended to hug the rat and be its friend. And they absolutely loved that moment. So as I said, we went through that first module and we had a really good time. Everyone really enjoyed themselves, even though it was quite basic. They had a good time. And the very next day, they wanted to play again. And so I was imagining that, hey, we've just completed the module that's in issue 1 of this magazine. It just so happens that I also have issue 2. In fact, I've got a few of the issues, not all of them, but I've got like 4 or 5. And so I was like, well, let's just pick up module 2 and continue the adventure, because it's with the same group of pre-rolled characters. Surely, because there are outstanding issues here. They finished the first module and it's like, well, where did these cranium rats come from? Why did they attack the tavern? They were created by mind flayers. Okay, well, are there mind flayers secretly puppeteering things behind the scene? Nope. The second adventure is completely unrelated to the first. And while you might be able to get away with that with grown-ups, where they have kind of unconnected adventures and they're just going on quests, children like stories. And so this is a lesson which I learned very quickly. Provide a clear structure, because children are used to the idea of stories. We tell them bedtime stories, they watch movies or whatever it might be. They are used to hearing stories. They're used to that typical structure of beginning, middle, end, because stories have conclusions. We were getting to the end of things, it was to their bedtime, we needed to wrap up. Leaving it hanging wouldn't have been good. So it was good that the module itself was only 1 or 2 hours long. We were able to get through that in time. But then it's important that each session has a clear goal, almost like chapters in a book. It's important that each session is a clear stepping stone which leads one to the next, to the next. Again, it doesn't matter if you're railroading. That was a previous lesson that we learned here. It's even if it's very obvious where you're going, obvious to you, it's important that each session feels complete in and of itself. Don't leave things hanging. Don't be like, well, we didn't manage to finish everything today, we'll pick that up next time. No, it needs to be a completed chapter of the story that you're telling. And this was why it was quite frustrating, because the next part of the adventure is unconnected. Basically, someone comes to the party, again in Fandalen. He approaches them in the field somewhere, and he basically tells them that he used to be an adventurer, and he remembered, he's found this map that he wrote a long time ago, and he has no recollection of having written this map. He has no idea where this map came from. It's apparently clearly written in his handwriting, but he has no idea where it's from, and he wants the party to kind of investigate. They go and investigate, and they find this very beautiful statue. They bring the statue back, and as it says in the campaign, afterwards the party has no recollection of ever having done that mission, because there's obviously some sort of weird memory altering properties around this statue. Well, that wasn't going to fly. My children had in their mind this mystery they were trying to solve. Where did the rats come from? And okay, if I'm going to run this next part of the adventure, it needs to be a stepping stone on that journey. So I'm kind of scrabbling around a little bit. I'm basically going through what it says. As you can see, it's kind of a mini dungeon crawl. it's really not a dungeon crawl. It's basically like 2 rooms. There's like 2 monsters you can fight. There's like an obstacle getting over the water, talked about that earlier, and there's like a locked trapdoor, and otherwise that's essentially it. But yeah, so they're going through this dungeon, and at the end I basically said that they found this statue. I described it as being a very beautiful elven princess, just like it says in the book, but this statue has its brain exposed, just like the cranium rats that they fought in the first session. It's a statue of a beautiful elven lady with an exposed brain. Ooh, what's that about? And then they investigated the statue and they found a concealed lever. Basically, with the arm pushes down, they push the arm down and the brain opens up, and it's actually a compartment. Inside the compartment, there is a book written in a language that they cannot read. However, my son, remembering that he has the spell Identify, he identifies the book, and I tell him, this is clearly a book that's been written by a mind flayer. In this campaign that I'm now making up on the fly as I go, mind flayers are now aliens from another planet, and they have come to Earth to try and take over the Earth. And apparently they really like eating brains. Human brains are very delicious. And what they do in this new lore, in this campaign, is they will eat your brain and then they will replace it with a piece of their own brain. And in this way, they are able to control lots of monsters, lots of individuals in the world, almost like puppets that they're puppeteering out in the world. That's how they kind of have a shared consciousness. And they are all controlled by the mother brain, which is going to be literally a giant brain in a jar. That is now a mind flayer in this world. So yeah, now they've got a clear hook for the next session. They wanted to know where the rats came from. The rats came from here. They went here and they managed to find this book. They can't read it. The book is written by a mind flayer. Okay, they need to find someone that can read it, and so on and so on and so on. And just thinking off the top of my head, I imagine at some point this is going to probably lead them to a village maybe. And in this village, everybody has had their brain eaten and they're all being controlled. This is essentially what was going to happen to Fandalin if the party hadn't intervened. The whole town has fallen under the sway of the mind flayer. They can liberate this town, then they'll find the way to the mother brain, and then they'll finally be able to defeat the mother brain and force the aliens back to their planet. Essentially being a nice mini campaign of about maybe 5 sessions in total. That's how I'm kind of picturing things. Keep it short, keep it sweet. Don't worry about leveling up. Don't worry about all of these tracking of loot and tracking of spell slots and all of these kind of technical game-like things that you normally would in a game of D&D. As far as my children were concerned, they were really, really good at following these things. Basically, if I was calling for certain checks, they were very good at finding the number, rolling the dice, and applying the appropriate modifier. They were less good at the elements that involved, you know, the combat and all of this sort of stuff here. So don't worry about it. Let them do what they're good at, and if they're not very good at it, let it slide. Keep it short, keep it simple, you know, just have fun. Enjoy playing time, enjoy spending time with your children. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, you know, give me a thumbs up. Maybe drop into the comments and let me know, have you ever run sessions for children before? What have you learned from the experience? I'd be fascinated to hear about some of your stories of groups that you've played with and the experiences that you've learned along the way. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful week. I'm actually going to be away on holiday, which is very exciting, so there might not be an update next week. But then afterwards I'll be back and my regular duties shall resume. So until then, bye-bye.